That's the new film. What the hell is that? Pretense. Oh, I get it. Oh, I get it. Okay. So that's what it's doing. It's recognizing my computer. Pass the image over here. Which is probably better because, I don't want to watch this. I want to get that memory. How do I get that freaking memory? Space in here too. I gotta be careful because I don't want to do what happened last time. The table got full of junk. Gotta keep this table pretty good. Show up right there. Let me go to settings. Systems preference. And show center. Oh man, I don't know where the hell this thing is at. I'm still working on my laptop. I can't work on my laptop. There. As soon as I was put the card in, it's supposed to recognize the memory. The pictures, let me see. General. No, not there. Sharing. Still, for some reason, it's not picking it up. I don't know why, but it's weird. Alright, let's see. Oh, now it picks it up. There you go. Shit. Alright, let me upload something. Um, again. There we go. Let's try this again. Okay, there we go. It's uploading now. Okay. Alright. Alright, get this out of here. This pencil. What did he do here? This is a watercolor study. Very simple. Oh, here goes another spray bottle. This doesn't belong there. Well, then this was the legend. I think it's almost the same as this. I don't know what that one is. What color that is. I'm gonna use this until I finish it, then I'll put some new color in here. So I'm gonna contaminate. I don't know what color this is, what hue this is. Very little left. What I should do is just take this little bit. Transfer it to this for now. Yeah, that's right. That's basically something like what I have there. I use this one here. I use some more. Okay, that's it. That's done. Let me take this memory, eject. I did this. Couldn't be ejected because it's preview until, okay. Okay, so let me then, me do that real quick, then I'll forget. Clear settings. Where's the format? Oh, here it goes. That's it. Okay, this goes up here. This back, in case I bang my head. Put this here that way, in case. You can see this. Oh, isn't there a rubber band around here? Oh, here we go. Okay. This one. And the back. Still use that one. This one, that's very nice. pictures that I took, they weren't all that good. Okay, let's try this stuff. Let's try this, just for the hell of it. Okay, this one is pretty much easy because part of the paper, I'm gonna okay, let me tape half of it. So come this way with it. This one will come a little bit at this angle. Or I could have gone higher with it, but that's fine. I'm gonna keep it that way. I think I'm gonna bring this more. Okay, yeah, I'll leave it there. This is gonna come. How far down? How far down am I gonna go with this? That mid part is right there. This is something that I'm not used to, drawing buildings. So now I probably in my earlier years I should have done more work in landscape. Everything was figurative. Maybe I can't blame myself, because it took just that amount of time to get good at that. So maybe if I would have been doing landscape also, I probably, I don't know, maybe I would have not been as good as I am today in figurative painting. Well, who knows, huh? This is, let me do it, bring this way, and then something there. Can't make out exactly what that is, but something like that. I'll just do a study on this alone, because I can't capture the, you have the street here, the people, and you have a canopy here. And if I was to put that canopy in, it would be right here. How can I do that? It wouldn't make sense. I'll just do it this way. This will be a study.
and it could lead to armed conflict.
Feeling water.
Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Jeff. This
That just
episode
makes
is sponsored by Surfshark.
the
You
3.
should be using a VPN like Surfshark to protect your identity whenever you go online. So disputes between India and China have been getting worse this year, especially since that deadly border clash in June. But while things seem to have calmed down for now, there's a lot at stake here. But here's something you maybe haven't thought about. Water. This border dispute is also about protecting India's and many other countries' water supply from Chinese communist control. It has to do mainly with these two rivers, which begin in Tibet. One flows from Tibet through northwestern India into Pakistan, and the other flows from Tibet through northeastern India into Bangladesh. These are major rivers. Millions of people depend on them. The Chinese Communist Party would prefer that millions of people depend on the Communist Party. And it's becoming a big damn problem. China has plans to build and finance up to 5 new dams along the Indus River in the part of Kashmir controlled by Pakistan. You see, Pakistan and India don't have enough conflict in Kashmir already, so China is just trying to help out. The problem with adding new dams is that it could mess up agriculture downstream. That includes sending less water to farmland and reducing the amount of silt, which also supports farming. And those problems could mean that huge numbers of Indian farmers have to relocate. The Indian government is very unhappy about this new dam in Kashmir. But surprise, Pakistan and China don't care. In July this year, a Chinese state-owned company began construction. It's the first major Chinese infrastructure project in Kashmir. It's part of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which China is tying into its global Belt and Road initiative. So there's a lot of money and political power behind it. Way more money and political power than the Indian farmers downstream have. So the project moves forward. Environmental concerns be damned. That's just the Indus River. There's also the Brahmaputra River. It flows from Tibet through India and down to Bangladesh. Over a period of 10 years, China has managed to construct 3 dams on the Brahmaputra River in parts of Tibet close to the Indian border. The largest one became fully operational in 2015. Initially, the Chinese government denied its existence, but when satellite photos came out, they were caught in a lie. They're like, don't worry, it won't affect the water flow downstream. Yes, dams never affect water flow. China now plans to build 8 more of these kinds of dams. There's another motivation for building them, though, besides generating power. In the kind of mega project fit only for the most self-aggrandizing dictatorships,
it's a lot of money.
The Communist Party wants to divert water from
We
these
just
rivers
lost Trump.
to
China's getting
Xinjiang,
bigger.
all the happy
And we're losing
ethnic
everything, and all our jobs are going
They plan to
overseas.
do that with a 600-mile-long tunnel. Chinese authorities hope it will turn Xinjiang into California. California?
But by the time everything is gone, I'll be long gone.
One expert
I'll
from
be
China's
dead.
Dalian University of Technology said the project
These kids
is
will be like,
anticipated
oh,
to solve the
shit.
problem of water, food, and drought in the country. Yes, massive projects that radically alter the environment will definitely solve the problems of water, food, and drought. But northwestern China is facing a water shortage crisis. It's a man-made crisis, of course. It stems mainly from cramming too many people and too much farmland in a region that's not naturally able to support it all. But I don't think the Chinese Communist Party would mind if they solved that crisis inside China by causing an environmental catastrophe for people in other countries. And according to an India analyst at the Hudson Institute, this will ultimately mean more Chinese troops on the border with India. This nightmare scenario has already started. Because China needs more water to develop, China has started plans to divert the flow of the river. The more China develops Tibet, the more Chinese troops will get deployed to secure these water resources. As a result, China's military activities in the India-China border around Tibet will increase. Because in the end, it always seems to come down to territorial conflict. And this episode has been sponsored by Surfshark. Whenever you go online, you should be using a VPN like Surfshark to protect your identity. Because governments and your internet service provider may be watching you. And besides protecting your identity, there's another advantage to using a VPN. You can access websites that are only available in other countries. For example, let's say you want to watch a movie where there's plenty of water, like Waterworld. But you can't access Waterworld on Netflix in the US. So, use Surfshark to switch your location to Australia, log in again, and there it is. Wait, if Kevin Costner's water filter can create drinkable water from his pee, why can't he also use it for seawater? Anyway, if you don't want to watch Waterworld, there's tons of other movies and TV shows that you can only watch if you're logged into Netflix in another country. By using a VPN like Surfshark.
That'll come with
With
a
one
small
account, you can connect as
brush.
many devices as you want. Try it out with a 30-day money-back guarantee. And Surfshark has a special discount for China Uncensored fans. Go to surfshark.com/uncensored and use the code UNCENSORED to get our special deal that includes 3 extra months for free. Click the link below. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.
Let's try to fix this.
The following is a conversation with Commander David Fravor, who was a Navy pilot for 18 years and commander of the Strike Fighter Squadron 41, also known as the Black Aces, a squadron of 12 airplanes consisting of several hundred people. He's also famously one of the people who with his own eyes saw and chased a UFO, an identified flying object in 2004 that is referred to as the Tic Tac, and the incident more formally referred to as the USS Nimitz UFO incident. His story, corroborated by several other pilots, from my perspective as a curious scientist and an open-minded human being, is the most credible sighting of a UFO in history, at least that I'm aware of. He's a humble, fascinating, and fun human being to talk to. I put out a call for questions on Reddit and many other places and tried to ask as many of the questions that people posted as I could. And overall, I really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm sure if the world wants us to, and if there's more questions to be had, we'll talk on this podcast again. Quick summary of the sponsors: Athletic Greens, ExpressVPN, and BetterHelp. Please check out the sponsors in the description to get a discount and support this podcast. As a side note, let me say that the world of UFOs and UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, and aliens in general is foreign to me because of the high ratio of outlandish conspiracy theorists to actual hard evidence. I'm a scientist first and foremost, but an open-minded one, often looking and thinking outside the box. I'm often disheartened by the closed-mindedness of the scientific community, and in equal part, I'm disheartened by the lack of rigor and basic scientific inquiry and study on the part of the conspiracy theorists. I believe there's a line somewhere between the two extremes that more inquisitive minds should walk. I think we humans know very little about our world, what's up there among the stars, and the nature of reality, and the nature of our very own minds. The path to understanding can only be walked humbly. The very idea that there is a possibility that David witnessed a piece of technology, whether human-made or alien-made, that moved in the way it did, should be inspiring to every scientist and engineer on this earth. There may be propulsion and energy systems yet to be discovered that, once understood and mastered, will put distant galaxies within reach of us human beings. Paradigm shifts in science and leaps in understanding can only happen, I think, if we open our eyes and allow ourselves to dream, to think from first principles, and remove the constraints on innovation placed on us by the scientific conventions and assumptions of prior generations. If you enjoy this thing, subscribe on YouTube, review it with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, follow on Spotify, support on Patreon, or connect with me on Twitter at Lex Friedman. As usual, I'll do a few minutes of ads now and no ads in the middle. More and more, I'm trying to make these ad reads unique and interesting and less adsy, more personal, but I give you timestamps so you can skip. But still, please do check out the sponsors by clicking the links in the description. It is honestly the best way to support this podcast. This show is brought to you by Athletic Greens, the all-in-one daily drink to support health and performance. I drink it every day to make sure I'm not missing any of the nutrition I need. Now, let me take a hard left turn and talk about fasting. I fast often, sometimes intermittent fasting of 16 hours and then an 8-hour eating period of 2 meals, sometimes 24 hours, that's one dinner to the next. I've been even considering doing a 48 or 72-hour fast that some people I look up to have done. People who've done it tell me that outside of weight loss and the different health benefits, it's a chance to meditate on the finiteness of life. Not eating somehow is a reminder that we're mortal, that every day is precious. I certainly experienced this with the 24-hour fast, and I think it goes even deeper for the 48, 72, and even week-long fasts. Anyway, I always break my fast with Athletic Greens. It's delicious, refreshing, just makes me feel good. So go to athleticgreens.com/Lex to claim a special offer of free vitamin D for a year. Again, go to athleticgreens.com/Lex to get free stuff and to support this podcast. This show is also sponsored by ExpressVPN. Get it at expressvpn.com/LexPod to get a discount. You probably know there's a show called The Office that I fell in love with, first with the British version with Ricky Gervais, and then the American version with Steve Carell. ExpressVPN lets you pretend your location is somewhere else, choosing from nearly 100 different countries, and then watch one of the 9 totally different other versions of The Office in other countries. Also, it protects you when you do shady things on the internet that you shouldn't be doing, like checking the website of this very podcast that for some reason was not available in Russia for a long time. Not sure if it still is, but if it isn't, you can use ExpressVPN to access it. I think of ExpressVPN like a pirate ship, and regular VPN-free life as a boring cruise from one place to another with no excitement in between. Choose wisely, my friends. Again, get it on any device at expressvpn.com/LexPod to get an extra 3 months free and to support this podcast. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp, spelled H-E-L-P, help. Like you would try to spell if you were on a deserted island and trying to get an airplane to notice you. Check it out at betterhelp.com/Lex. They figure out what you need and match you with a licensed professional therapist in under 48 hours. You can communicate by text anytime and schedule weekly audio and video sessions. Now, hard left turn, let me talk about desert islands. Whatever you think of it, I love the movie Castaway with Tom Hanks and the idea of spending time on an island, alone, with potentially no hope. The natural question is, if I could, what would I bring to this island? The answer is complicated, but let me pick one thing. The first thing that popped into my crazy mind, which is the Introduction to Algorithms book, also called CLRS, for the first letters of the last name of its 4 authors. I find algorithms beautiful, like a little toolbox for a simple world inside computers, when the real world outside is an impossible, chaotic mess. I would love pondering the puzzles in that book for months, far away from human civilization. Anyway, check out BetterHelp at betterhelp.com/Lex to get a discount and to support this podcast. And now, finally, here's my conversation with David Fravor. You're a graduate of the Navy Fighter Weapons School.
Yeah, I am.
Better known as Top Gun. So let me ask the most ridiculous question. How realistic is the movie Top Gun?
So it's funny, we used to joke, and a friend of mine who was a Top Gun instructor said this. There's 2 things in the original Top Gun that are true, that are very realistic. One, there is a place called Top Gun. And number 2 is they do fly airplanes there. Other than that, I went through in '97 class 497. There's actually a log of every single person that's went through, kind of like SEAL training. You know, there's a list. So people, because there's a lot of posters out there, oh, I was a Navy SEAL. No, you weren't. Well, I went to Top Gun. You could actually go to Top Gun. And matter of fact, just to get a Top Gun patch, the real patch, you have to have gone there. So a lot of the patches you see running around are not real. The real ones are controlled. The people that make them honor that. And when you go in, they look up your name. If you want to get one, they look up your name. You just tell them. They go, okay, here, and they'll sell them to you. If you were not on the list, you're gonna get no patch, because it's a pretty big deal to go through. But it's, for me, probably one of the best experiences of flying, because everyone there is extremely competent. It's very, very challenging, but it's what we all signed up to do. So it's just the entire group that is, when you want to be that, you know, that level, where you go, everyone really cares and everyone really wants to be good.
Is it competitive like what was it in the movie?
No, it's, when you go through, it's, if anything, it's more of the students, and then there's the instructor side. And the instructor sides are really, they're guys that they just chose to stay up in Fallon. And it's extremely difficult job because they have a very small tolerance for not being good. So their briefs, the guys, when they give a lecture, so let's just say there's a fighter employment lecture, which is one of the hardest ones. It takes about 2 days to give the fighter employment lecture. The guy who gives the lecture goes through multiple, what they call them, murder boards, where he's scrutinized by his peers and he practices. By the time they actually stand in front of a class, they pretty much have their 250 PowerPoint slides memorized, and they don't even turn around. They just click and they know them in order. And they repeat the same thing over. It's standardized. So they're extremely, extremely standardized when you go through the school, and there's a reason for that. Because what they're doing is they're training. So when you come out of Top Gun, you're called a Strike Fighter Weapons and Tactics Instructor. Okay, so you're SFTI. When you come out of that, your job is to go usually to one of the weapons schools on the east or west coast and train the fleet squadrons, and then you visit the squadrons and train and do upgrade rides and all that. So there's a reason that they're extremely particular when you go through the course. It is literally one of the best things, and it's not a rank-based thing, because think, oh, Navy, you can come in as an 04 lieutenant commander. The lieutenants, the hierarchy, well, it used to be, I don't know how it is exactly today, but I imagine it's the same. The hierarchy is actually based on seniority at the school, not necessarily rank. So when the tactical decisions are made, which are based on fact and trying things out in the Fallon ranges, they set the top X number of folks that have been there seniority-wise, and I mean time-wise, are the ones that actually make the decision. And when the door, you may not agree, but when the door opens and everyone comes out from the staff, they all speak the same language. And it has to be that way, which is why the school has been so effective since it was founded. So it's an incredible group of individuals.
So there's a bar of excellence that the instructors demand.
Oh, very much so, and they're held to it. So it's not hey, I'm now an instructor, so I can do what I want. There is a standard, and they have to live up to that standard. They have to, and I mean every moment of every day. So if they go someplace, if they go from Fallon and they come down and they're called site visits, where they come down and they'll come to Lemoore, California, which is where the West Coast Fighter Wing is at for the Navy, and they go around and start flying sorties with the fleet squadrons to kind of pass on some of that knowledge. That's that same high level of standard. They can't just drop your guard because you wear the Top Gun patch, and people know that. And they wear light blue shirts, so it's pretty easy to identify them when they're out there. And then everyone else who's been through the school, including them, have the patch on their sleeve. So there's a standard that's expected when you come out of there.
So you were a Navy pilot for 18 years.
Yes.
Can you briefly tell the story of your career as a pilot?
Yeah. So first I was enlisted. I was a Marine, and then the Marines actually recommended me to go to the Naval Academy. So it's always better to be lucky than good. But I got to go to the Naval Academy, and I finished. And I've had that dream to fly, so when I got selected...
So you've always dreamed of flying?
Yeah. Since 1969, when I watched Neil Armstrong walk on the moon. At that point, I asked my mom. I remember watching it. I was just prior to being 5. And I said, wow, Dad, it's so cool, Mom. And she said, well, they were all pilots. And at that point, it was like, I'm going to be a pilot. And if you knew me growing up, because I was a little bit of a delinquent, people are just like, yeah, right. I used to joke, I'm going to fly jets, I'm going to drop bombs. And if people that knew me when I was a kid, they'd be like, yeah. And they'd be like, not a chance. And then when I did, I actually had this is a funny story, and I'll get to it, and I'll finish my career, but I was at my cousin's wedding, and we all grew up in the same neighborhood. We kind of, the Italian side of the family, that's how we grew up. So it was my house, right down the street was my cousin Chad, and then right around the corner is my cousin Ray, and my aunts and uncles and stuff. The guy 2 doors down from mine, I was a paper boy in the neighborhood, so that one knew me. And I went to my cousin's wedding, and Mr. Race looks at me and he says, David Frager. I go, Mr. Race, how you doing? He goes, you fly jets, Top Gun and all that. I go, yes, sir. He goes, I figured you'd be in jail by now. It was kind of to me, it was a little bit of a badge of honor going on. I kind of overcame that. But
what do you attribute that to? So I've heard you before just now say that it's better to be lucky than good. You talk modestly about about just being lucky, but if you were to describe your trajectory, maybe in a way of advice, like retrospectively, how'd you pull it off to be truly a special person?
The easiest way is one, never take no. Don't let anyone put you down and say you can't do it, or there's. I knew what I was capable of inside. And if I really believe if you want something and you want to do something, then you can achieve it. Not in all cases. Like if I loved basketball and I really wanted to be in the NBA, there's a realism that says I'm 5'8" and I got like a really short vertical leap, and I'm really not that good at basketball. Probably not ever going to happen, no matter how hard I try and practice. It's just the way it is. Or for me to be in the NFL, I'm not fast. I'm not that big. It's just physically, I'm incapable of doing that. But there's things that don't really tie to a true physical ability as far as size and strength, but it's mental. And I'm not saying you have to be a genius and super smart to be a fighter pilot. Matter of fact, you don't. It really comes down to the ability to think very quickly. 80% solution is typically good enough, because if you overthink it, you're behind. And then in an air-to-air fight, that's what happens. People try and overthink it. And before you know it, because it's happening so fast, you can't get to the nth degree, 6 decimal places. 80% solution is good enough.
You build up a really strong gut for the 80% solution.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in the 80% solution.
I love that.
If you get 80%, you can go, and then you can always adjust, which is exactly what, like if you're fighting in BFM, the 80% solution is, it's like a chess game, but it's a really, really fast chess game where you go, I'm doing this, and then I know that if I do a maneuver, if he's going to counter it correctly, he should do A. If he doesn't do A, he does some degree less, like B, C, D, and then I know how bad his error is, and then I capitalize. So I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to go, I need to go to 47 degrees nose high. If I just kind of get above 40, then I'm good, and I can watch how he reacts, and then I can adjust for that, and you continually work that problem, and you chip away, because if you start neutral, you're just basically chipping away and gaining advantage, till eventually, and if you're really, fighting, just guns only rear quarter, where you got to get behind the guy, kind of World War II dogfighting type stuff, then it's literally, it's a very, very fast chess game that happens at, 400 knots, 300 knots, depends.
So if you get to be one of the rare individuals that are able to do that, you just had the dream and didn't take no for an answer.
Yeah, well, part of it is family. My dad was, I used to call him a fire ready in guy. He'd smack me and then ask me what I did wrong.
Yeah. Good parenting.
Back then, I joke and people look, because, at times it was kind of tough, because he can be pretty demanding, but on the other side, I probably needed to be reined in a little bit at times. But then everyone else in my family, my mom was really awesome when I was a kid. My grandfather, who is a big part of it, my mom's dad, who he taught me a lot, and you have a question there that we'll talk about him, but huge influence, very, very positive, and a lot of the stuff that I do today and decisions are based on things that he taught me. And and I figured, it was the first funeral I ever went to, and it was about 3 miles long, and church was overfilling, and people were out. He was a beer delivery guy, dead serious. And you go, if someone asks who died, the Pope.
So a lot of people love them.
So back to my career.
Yeah,
the
let's
first
go.
question, because I'm getting down a rabbit hole. No, when I was I was gonna stay in the Marines. I really wanted to go. Man, I love the Corps. I think it's of all services, it's that one. Everything is involved, and they're very, very professional. And it was a great organization to join. But I went out to the Nimitz on my freshman cruise. After your freshman year at the Naval Academy, you go out on a ship, and you're an enlisted person. You get to experience that half, but I already was enlisted, so it's fine with me.
Because it comes up a lot. Do you mind saying what the Nimitz is, what a ship is?
So
what, like,
so Nimitz is an aircraft carrier. So it's 4.5 acres of sovereign U.S. territory that floats around the U.S. oceans.
It's a giant thing. Does it have weapons on it?
Yeah.
The air wing is really the weapons. It does have defensive weapons, but for the most part, it's a giant moving airport, is what it is. So I was out there watching the airplanes land and take off, and I'm like, oh. And the squadrons that were out there, one of the squadrons was VF-41 and F-14 squadron, VF-84, an F-14 squadron, and then a couple of A-6 squadrons. And we actually ended up pairing up and hanging out with some of the A-6 pilots and DNs, so it was a really neat experience. And I said, I want to do that. And the way to do it was to go in the Navy, because there are Marine squadrons that go out to the aircraft carriers, but most of them are land-based, to support the Marines, because they're that unit, that whole unit. The Marine Corps is that one service that has it all. And so when I graduated and I got to, I worked hard through primary, and that's where I knew Missy. We actually went through together, Missy Cummings. We went through primary together, and then I went to Kingsville. We all selected at the same time. I went to Kingsville. There was another guy, Scott Wiedemeyer, the three of us. So I went to Kingsville, Scott went to Beeville, and Missy went to Meridian. So the three of us that we had all went through, we selected out of primary together. We all ended up going jets. And that's how, besides from school, I knew her at school too. Long story, I got done, got winged. It took me 2 years to the day from the time I graduated the Naval Academy until I got my wings. And through some luck, I ended up getting A6s on the West Coast, which is a side-by-side bomber. So it's a pilot on the left seat and the bombardier navigators on the right seat. It was built in the 60s. It is all-weather, and it flies low at night. It's got a terrain mapping radar.
How many, I guess, is that a good term to use, fighter jets as a broad category for the public?
Yeah, that's fine.
How many fighter jets are side-by-side like that?
That was, in the Navy, that was the only one. The Air Force, the F-111 was a side-by-side, but the Navy, it was the A6. And then there's the EA-6B, which is a derivative of that. Now that those are all gone. The EA-6Bs just went away a few years ago, and now the E-18G Growler is the replacement for the EA-6B. There's never a replacement for the A-6 that I flew. It really became the F-18, which the A-6 could go quite a bit further distance-wise by fuel than the Hornet. And
the Hornet is the F-18. Is there usually two people in the plane, but they're usually like in front and behind?
In the modern two-seaters, yes. But most of the tactical airplanes in the world today are single-seat.
Single-seat, just one person?
One person. With the exception of, someone will yell at me, but really with the exception of the F-15E Strike Eagle and the F-18F Super Hornet, which is the F is a two-seater. And the G is also a two-seater, but it's more of an electronic attack by, say, full-up fighter bomber.
So most of the time that you've flown in your, like I said, 18-year career, was it two-seater?
That was about half and half. So I started off in A6, was a two-seater. Then I went to single-seat F-18s, and I flew those all the way up until 2001, to the end of 2001. And then I shifted over and started flying the Super Hornets, and I've flown both of those, the E's and the F's. But I deployed when I had command of the FA-41. I had the two-seat. They were F Squadron.
So you eventually ended up commanding the Strike Fighter Squadron 41. I love the name, the Black Aces. What is there some parts of that journey that are amazing, parts of it that are tough that kind of stand out?
To me, it was a huge honor, and I got to serve with I got pulled up because the people that are XOs, because we fleet up, you go from the number 2 guy to the number 1 guy. So the XO becomes the CO, so the executive officer becomes the commanding officer. So I had worked with now soon-to-be Vice Admiral Weitzel, he was Commander Weitzel at the time, was the XO, and he really wanted, because he knew there was a little bit of a problem when the Super Hornets came into Lemoore. Lemoore had been a single-seat fighter community since forever. And now all of a sudden you've got the F-18F coming in, which has the weapon systems operators in the back that are not pilots, they're weapon systems operators, and there's a difference. And Kenny is a weapon systems operator. And Kenny knew, because of my A6 background, that I have a switch that I can go 1 seat, 2 seat, 1 seat, 2 seat. Because when you fly 2 seat, there's a lot of stuff that the pilot will offload and take the advantage of the weapon systems operator. And it's not that 1 + 1 = 2 in that environment, because there's a huge amount of capabilities that the single seat has, and the autonomy that comes for the ability to make decisions quickly and how well the airplane flies. But it does equal more than 1, and I would say that 1 + 1 with 2 people is a minimum of 1.5, because you've got an extra head, you've got extra eyes, you've got someone that can monitor systems. The airplanes can do 2 things at once. I mean, there's an incredible amount of capability that we add when we do that.
Can we just pause on that? Just
Yeah.
For me, from like a human factors perspective and also an AI perspective, how difficult? So there's like, when there's 2 people, there's also a third person that's the AI part. There's some level of automation, like autopilot, maybe.
That's correct.
Maybe you can kind of talk about the psychology of, like, you said, making decisions really quick, 80%. How do you deal with another brain working with you? And then also the automation. Is there an interesting interplay that you get to learn? And also, as that changed throughout your career, I imagine it gotten better in terms of the automation, or perhaps not.
Well, I can tell you. So let's start this. No, this is good. This is good, and I'm enjoying this, because now we actually get to talk about something other than the Tic Tac. So let's start with the A6. The A6 was really an analog airplane that was built in the 60s. All right, and there's been studies done on the crew coordination, which is the interaction between the pilot and the bombardier navigator. So we would fly low at night in the mountains. So I was stationed up in Whidbey Island, Washington. So you've got the Cascades and incredible amount of time. And we would get in the simulators, because unlike normally people think terrain following, and there's the radars, the 111, the B1 has a system like this, but the radar can see and it'll fly, basically flies a straight line. So it goes up and over mountains and back down and up and over mountains, where the A6 was really manual. So you do this low-level routes where you're gonna fly in the mountains at night. You're gonna be at 500 to 1,000 feet above the ground, ripping through like fog layers, because you don't need to see outside. You're literally flying a little TV screen and a radar.
What are you looking at most of the time? So you just as a screen.
It's this really primitive. If you look at it now, what we did, you'd think, wow, that was crazy, but it was really fun. So
is it similar to like the FLIR stuff?
No.
This
thing is totally radar based. Now, the airplane had a FLIR ball. It's target recognition and multi-sensor. It was called TRAM.
So you're looking at like basically like dots of hard objects?
No, actually what it is the bombardier navigator had a radar, and he was getting raw feed off of a pulse radar in front. Okay, so it's just basically mapping the mountain. So if you look at a mountain on a radar and you're coming up on it, the front side is going to give you a really bright return, and then the back side, it's just going to be a giant shadow, because you can't see on the other side. So the bombardier navigators would do that, and they would have charts, and they could shade their charts knowing that, hey, if we turn a little bit left here, we can get in this valley, we can sneak up this valley, and then go around the back side of the mountain, which is what the airplane would do.
And sorry to interrupt. I'm going to just keep asking dumb questions. I apologize. But the pilot, can you at a high level say what the pilot does versus the bombardier?
Yes. So
you're actually just controlling.
I'm flying the jet. I have the throttles, the stick, and I have it's about probably a 4-inch or 6-inch wide by maybe 4 inches, 5 inches high. It's literally a CRT. That's how old it is. A CRT screen, and what the radar would do is the bombardier navigator is looking at his radar. He's looking out about 12.5 miles in front of the airplane. So he has the range really scoped down, because the radar can see a lot further. He's looking at about 12.5 miles when we're in the terrain mode where we're dodging mountains and stuff. And what the pilot has is they're called range bins, and there's 8 of them. So the very far range bin is the 12.5 mile, and the closest range bin, it's a thing. It'll be like between like a half a mile and a quarter mile to 3/4 of a mile. The next one might be 3/4 of a mile to 2 miles, and then it just keeps going out like that. So if there's a mountain in front, let's say we're on a flat plain, and there's a mountain out in the distance at 15 miles, and we're just driving right at it. So when we get to the point where it hits 12.5 miles, where the radar is going to see it on his scope, my range bin for that would pop up, and it would show like a big bump, like a mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I got closer to it, the next range bin would pop up and show it.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see that bump was moving towards me. And then if I turned a little bit, to go over here, I'd see the mountain go over to the right-hand side, and I could do that. But it wasn't like a video game. It's literally like, if you think of the original Ataris.
Yeah. But you build up, I imagine, that you start to get a really deep sense of like the actual 3D environment based on that little Atari style display.
You're exactly right, and you have to train. So there's been studies. As a matter of fact, a lot of the bases, and people will probably argue with me, but it's true. There were studies done watching A6 crews in our simulators. We called it the WIST, Weapon Systems Trainer, and it was not even a motion. It just kind of sat there, and you could fly these things. They had terrain that they would inject into the system. But the crew coordination. So my first fleet bombardier navigator, who I'll name him. His name's Chris Sato. He's works at Apple, pretty high up. MIT grad. I think computer engineering. He's scary smart. So Chris could really work. As a matter of fact, all the guys I flew with. So there's another guy, Matt, who also worked at Apple, who's now at SAP. We did our first night traps together. The bond between us, I mean, it's one of those things that you're never going to forget. But Chris and I, when we started flying together, we were actually the most junior crew in the squadron. We'd spent a lot of time training, and Chris was amazing at how he could work the system. One, because he was extremely brilliant, and he had that inquisitive mind of, we can do all these different things, and there's all these degradation modes. But we spent a lot of time to see how good we could actually get, because you almost talk in partials. So as the BN is looking at his radar scope, Chris would say, I've got rising terrain. That's just what they'd say, showing rising terrain at 12 miles. And I'd see the little bump, and I'd say, got it. This is going to go to your question on the autonomy and how you work with 2 heads.
Yes.
So when you first get together, the interaction, it's almost like you have to rehearse it. You have to know. And you talk in full sentences. The more and more we fly together, Chris could go, I'm showing, and he'd get like rising out, and before he finished, I'd say, I've got it. So you end up starting to talk in partials, because I have to trust him. Like, I mean, I can have no doubt that he knows how to do his job, because I'm literally looking at this little scope that's not giving me this continuous picture of that mountain moving. Remember, the mountain's here, and then it's going to pop up here, and then it's going to pop up here, because there's gaps in the coverage on how the system was set up. Remember, it's an analog system, to where he is telling me, like, I can't see all the way to the left, and he's got a wider scope on the radar, but my screen doesn't show that. So he's telling me, start a left turn.
How to avoid the
start
mountain.
a hard turn, and we would do that. So my trust...
And this is all happening quick?
Very quick. Well, we would typically fly between 420 and 480 knots of ground speed.
How many miles an hour?
427 miles a minute.
Okay.
Or between 7 and 8 miles a minute is what you're flying.
That's fast.
At night. I mean, I broke out of clouds. I mean, I remember him and I flying. We were on its IR. It's called an IR route, an instrument route that's low. They're all around the country. There's the IR 344 that we used to fly, which would coast in off of Oregon. You'd fly from the land, you go out over the ocean, turn around, and then you could practice actually coming in on a coastline. And we were flying, and we ended up in the clouds. Keep in mind, we're between 500 and 1,000 feet in the mountains, and we're in the clouds. You can't see anything. And I had to turn off our red lights that flash. They're called the anti-collision lights, because it was reflecting off the clouds, and it starts to bother you. It just gets annoying. So I turned it off, and we're flying. We break out of that coastal marine layer, and poof, we break out, and it's a decent night. And this is right by Mount St. Helens. This is kind of where we're coming in. So we're coming in from the east, and we're just north of Mount St. Helens is where the route goes. and you look up, because you can kind of see the silhouette of this mountain that's right next to you, but you're flying along, you're just like, you got to trust. And you can see houses. You can see the lights. They're above you. We're literally below people's houses, flying down these alleys and stuff. So just incredible experience. So when you take that and then you move into an F-18F. So now we're into modern technology that was actually built in this century. And you're flying. So now, the Wizzo is behind us. And we're not doing those night low levels, but that same type of crew coordination that has to happen, because what you're doing is you're sharing a load. So most of the communications that go out of the airplane, the Wizzo does all the talking. He uses his feet. That's the weapons systems operator in the back of an F-18F. So he's going to run, the radar kind of runs itself now, but we have a situational awareness display, and it's linked to all the other airplanes.
Just out of curiosity, what's the situational awareness display? Because that term comes up a lot.
Think of it as a God's eye view. So if you have the back of the Super Hornet the Block 2s has about an 8x10 display for the Wizzos, that they can look at. The pilot's is smaller. It's down between it's a 6x6 between his legs, and they're getting ready to redesign that. Boeing is, but when you look, it'd be like if you put your airplane and you're looking down. So all the stuff, like if your radar's seeing bad guys out in front of you, you'd be like looking down, going, "Oh, I'm right here. I know there's bad guys out here. My wingman is over here," and it shows everything. It's just like it gives you. You can look at that display and go, "Oh."
Yeah,
I can see where everything's at. I can see if one guy's trying to target another guy. It shows you all this. It's an incredible amount of knowledge that comes up for the crews to maintain the overall picture of what's going on.
The big picture sense of what's going on.
Because it's happening so fast. And this is that autonomy piece. This is the third brain. So we're all looking at it, and the third brain is doing fusion. It's pulling stuff together, going, "Oh, this is all this guy, this is this guy, this is this guy." It's sending it out through the link, so all the airplanes are talking to each other through this digital network, that we don't even see. It just says, that airplane says, "Hey, I'm over here," and it tells us, and we go, "Oh, he's right there." And then we can go, his airplane says, "Oh, I'm looking at this airplane, this bad guy," and it shows us, "Oh, he's over there and he's looking at this guy." I mean, it's an incredible amount of visual intake, because your eye, you can hear a lot, but when you look down at stuff, it's you can solve the picture really quick.
The third brain is doing the sensor fusion, the integration of the different sensors, and gives you a big picture view. What about the control? Like, is there, and I apologize as if this is a dumb question, but people use the high level term of autopilot. How much is there, let's use a loose term of AI. How much automation is there? How much AI is there in helping you control the airplane?
The AI piece would be more of a control loop, because of the digital flight controls. So the airplane actually, they had to make the airplane easier to fly. And when I say easy, it's relative, because people go, "I could do it," because I did it on flight sim. Real life is a lot different. In flight sim, you have no apparent fear of death. You'll do things in a simulator that you would never do in real life. But the autonomy in the airplane to allow you to manage, because you think about it, you've got a radar that's feeding you data, you've got a targeting pod that's feeding you data. All that stuff is hooked to your head, because you've got a joint helmet-mounted cueing system on that basically maps the magnetic field in the cockpit, so it can tell where your head's at looking. So if I turn my head to the right, the radar will actually look to the right, the targeting FLIR will look to the right. And oh, by the way, the back seater has a helmet on too, so he can look to the left and he can do things. So depending on what sensor he's controlling, so if he's got control of the targeting pod and he looks left, the targeting pod looks left. But if I have something where I want to lock a guy up that I don't see, that maybe the radar didn't see, but I can get over and now point the radar, because it's a phase array radar now, it doesn't really scan. There's all kinds of cool stuff that technology brings. Because if you went back 30 years and said, "Hey," or 40 years ago and said, "Hey, we're gonna have this helmet and you're gonna be able to slew everything to your head," and I don't mean a mechanical setup, but I mean literally you're just gonna map magnetic resonance and go, "Oh, look," and I can literally slew my sensors this fast, and then mash a button and transfer high quality coordinates from a system into a joint, a JDAM, which is a joint direct attack munition, that is the GPS bombs that you see all the time, and then let that thing fly, and I'm solving this problem in seconds, vice minutes, or, "Hey, I got it, we're gonna have to mensurate coordinates," and you bring back the data, and then they do all the targeting for it, and then they send another group out to get it. Instead of all that, now it's that fast.
So there's we probably don't have enough time to talk about the beautiful fusion of minds that happens when two people are flying, controlling the plane. But at a high level, this is a really interesting question for people who don't know what they're talking about, like me, which is, what is the difference between a human being and an AI system? Like, what is the ceiling of a current AI technology for controlling the planet? Like, how much does the human contribute? Is it possible to have automated flight, for example? Like, what is the hardest part about flying that a human does expertly that an AI system cannot? In warfare situations, in flying fighter jet.
So I would say AI systems are usually black and white. When you write the algorithm for an AI system, it's really, it's basically you're taking thought and turning it into a giant math problem is really what you're doing, right? So you've got this logical math problem. Math problems are, there's a line that says I can or I can't, and it's a very finite line, you know, but you can go up to the line. Where a human, we all have gray areas where we go, maybe, yeah, I'll try it.
So humans can operate within that gray.
So if you take an airplane and say, and I'll just take a Hornet for a while, a Super Hornet, it doesn't matter, any airplane, and you go, here is the flight performance model of the airplane. So if you know an EM diagram is the energy. So it basically says the airplane can fly as slow as this, it can go as fast as this, it can pull this many G's, force of gravity, you know, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then based on the airfoil design and everything else and how it can pull, here's how it's going to fly, you know, because it's really physics-based. Well, depending on how you write the AI, but typically AI, you don't want the airplane to leave controlled flight, right? You want to maintain it so that it is flying in a controlled envelope. Where there are times, and you can go back to World War I, where people intentionally departed the airplane from controlled flight in order to obtain an advantage, that's where the human goes, can I do this? I know it's outside of where I would normally go, but I can do that. So you can do some crazy things now, especially since the flight control logic in modern airplanes with digital flight controls, they're extremely forgiving. So you can literally, I've done things in Super Hornets that literally, even as a pilot inside the airplane, you're just like, wow, I cannot believe it just did that. Like, it'll flop ends, which defies most logic. And I guess, you know, in a way you could probably program it, but I still think that when you get to the edges that may or may not give you an advantage, there are things that a human will do that AI won't. And I don't think we've got to the point, because how do you map illogical solutions? You know, most AI is logical. It's based on some type of premise. When you write the algorithm to control it, there's bounds.
Yeah, there's this giant mess, like you said. The difference between the simulator and real life also gets at that somehow. That there is somehow the fear of death, all of that beautiful mess comes into play. Is there a comment you can make on commercial flight, like with Sully landing that plane famously versus the simulator, all of those discussions? Is there some...
Well, it's very similar to what I was talking about earlier with the A6. So one is when you're flying with a crew, there's standardization. So you got to remember, when Sully flew, when his first officer, that's the co-pilot, showed up, you know, it's the first time they met. And this happens all the time in the commercial world. You know, there's 6,000 to 7,000 pilots at United Airlines. You know, your chance of flying with the same guy all the time is slim to none. Where in the Navy, we were crewed. So I had a primary and a secondary Wizzo that flew with me.
For months?
Oh yeah, for like all of the deployment. So because you want it to know, you have to
trust and all of those things.
It increases the capability of the airplane. It's not to say we can't swap out, but for true effectiveness, especially in very complex missions like the forward air controller, where we're in the air actually controlling ground assets and supporting ground troops. If you're in a high threat area, which is crazy busy, you have to be melded when you do that. You have to have trained to do that job, otherwise you're going to be ineffective. So when you get to the commercial world, and I've got tons of friends that fly commercial, there is a standardization. Like, we know that at this point I'm going to put this switch, you're going to do that, and everyone, they know their rules. Captain's going to do this, first officer's going to do this. And they know that when the emergency breaks out, so in Sully's case, when they take the birds and they know they've got a problem, and if you listen to the cockpit recordings of the two of them talking, You know, you gotta remember, they're talking to each other in the first place, but they're also talking to the aircraft controllers in the United States. And it's like, look, we got a bird flight and the first off line noise, they silence the alarm, it silence the alarm, the first off is spin like a book, is going through the procedures, planes have been flying the airplane, knowing that they've lost the motor. I mean, you gotta think of the decision process, like they're trying to get him to get the airplane and New Jersey, and realize what's happening is they're going to plane and they made a decision soon enough that everyone on the airplane is going to see the plane in Hudson River, and do it right. And everything is supposed to walk away from that. Right. The only one that didn't survive is the person who got pushed out of the airplane.
What is it about the team that you look at tonight? Is there something that put into words or what that deep down and instantly developed the pilot?
When we train, aviation is a tough thing. If you make bad decisions, this is one of the things that the military guys are making bad decisions. So when you look at the people and it's mental in this but there's a point where you have to make a decision. You can't second guess. So you decided I'm putting this thing head on river. You couldn't all of a sudden halfway through it go, well, maybe I shouldn't do it. You looked and made a quick assessment and you got 80% these are not, let's take them off the first question. I know earlier in the junior I was, yeah. So the big deal for a whole lot of the water stuff. So what's my next option? Right? I hope the river goes. You have to make really, really fast decisions, and then once they go, that 80% solution, realize, right, I'm going into the Hudson, there's the 80%, get the book out, let's see if we can get an air start, because if you listen to the tapes, they're trying to get it air started. The closer he gets to the water, the more he's going, I'm ditching the airplane. So the original decision this is my best option right now, this is where I'm going, and you start eliminating anything that could possibly change the events, which they tried to do, and then he gets to that last minute, he says, we're going into water, they change the plan, they secure the airplane, they do exactly what they're doing, and he does that basically flawless landing on the Hudson. But you got to remember, it's every 6 months for commercial, they go back and they do research in the airplane in the simulator, where they train to the airplane being broken. You just lost a motor. You just lost another motor. So they go through this extensive training, and all these, and it's, we used to refer to it in the Navy as the pain cave, where you're going to get in, because you know that when you get in for your check ride in a simulator, that the airplane is going to break. You're going to lose hydraulic, and it's sometimes they're a problem, like, oh, I just lost this hydraulic system, but I'm having an issue on the other motor. Well, if I shut down this motor, I've got hydraulics, because there's 2 hydraulic systems, one on each motor. Well, if I've got an issue with the left motor hydraulic system and my right motor is starting to give me indications, do I want to shut the right motor down because that's going to kill my hydraulic system that's good, and now I'm flying on a good motor with a bad hydraulic system, and without hydraulics the airplane won't fly. So they're challenging problems that you have to think through in real time, and of course the weather's never good, it's always dark, it's always crappy, you're going to break out at night. I mean, it's just, all this stuff gets compiled on top of you, and it's intended to increase the level of stress, because when things happen, like in Sully's case, we like to joke it's going to stem power, where the functional part of your brain shuts down and you are literally on instinct like an animal. Well, if you've trained so much that is the instinctive reaction that you're going to have, when the main part of your cognitive abilities start to shut down, you're running, that instinct is ingrained so much into you that you know exactly what to do. And that's literally how it happens.
So there's no, how do I put it, fear of death? Like in Sully's case, do you think he was at all ever thinking about the fact that his decision is wrong, a lot of people are going to die?
I can't speak for him, but I would say there was so much going on at the cockpit in that time.
There you go.
His mindset was probably, I can do this, I'm trained, I'm going to do the procedures, I've practiced this before, I've done these things, and I'm assuming that in his mindset, because I never thought about when things were really bad, if you're having problems with your airplane, that I was going to abort, and plan it into the ground. It was always, maybe it's an ego thing where you think I can do this.
So have you experienced fear during flight? Like, I mean, one way, we just offline mentioned Mike Tyson. He talked about like as he's walking up to the ring, he's like he starts out basically in fear and worried about how things are going to go. I mean, it's purely to put into words is fear, but as he gets closer and closer to the ring, the confidence grows and grows until the ego basically takes over to where you think there's no way anybody could defeat me. So like that's his experience of overcoming fear. But did you experience any kind of thing like that, or do you just go to the part of the brain that goes to the training, and then you just go to the instinctual 80% solution?
I would say I was never afraid. I think that would be. I couldn't tell you that anyone I know that wasn't afraid at one time. And for most of us, especially Navy carrier pilots, it's usually, especially when you're new and you got to go out and it's nighttime and there's no moon and the weather sucks and the deck's moving. The ship's going up and down, because it will scare the ever-living shit out of you. Can I say that?
You can definitely say that. So it's about landing and take off.
That is, if you they used to wire people up. They did it during Vietnam. Guys would go flying missions. When they were flying low and crazy stuff was going on and people were getting shot down a lot. The highest anxiety and heart rates were coming back to land on board an aircraft carrier.
How hard is it to land on that? It seems impossible. Like for a civilian, I guess, like me, it just seems crazy that a human can do that.
The problem with night is, and there's different degrees of night, just like day. I mean, there's the clear full moon night, where it's like, woo, this is not that bad. But you got to remember, at night, I think everyone can associate with you're driving in your car and it's just it's an overcast, dark night, and you're on a country road with no side lights. Most people have a tendency to slow down, just by nature of, oh my God, because what you'll do is you'll outdrive your headlights because it is so dark. And you get outside of the city and get up into New Hampshire, especially when the roads are curving, and the lines probably aren't that good. Now take that and multiply it by like 1 million, because you have no depth perception. What you think is fixed, the runway, is actually moving.
Up and down and left to right.
And when it's really bad, you can actually see it move. Wow. And we have two systems. There's an automatic system that's actually it stabilizes with the inertials on the ship. And then there's the ILS. Now, civilian pilots will tell you that ILS is a precision approach, which gives you azimuth and glide slope. You come down, it's like a plus. On the carrier, it's not. It's really just a beam that goes out, and it's considered a non-precision approach. It's not stabilized at all that. And I've been where you can actually watch the needle and the tachyon needle will move. There's all kinds of stuff moving because the base that it's all sitting on is doing this. And ships don't just go up and down. They do this, so the bow goes up and down and the tail like you normally see a ship. And then that's pitch. And then it has roll, so it's doing this. And then it has heave, so the whole boat is going up and down while it's pitching and rolling. And you're going to land on that. I remember landing, I was with Chris Sato, and Chris and I, we were off the USS Ranger, which is now decommissioned. It's turned into razor blades. We're flying the old A6, and we come in, and it was off of San Diego. It was just an ugly night, because San Diego always has a marine layer that is about 1,200 feet. It was a little lower than that night, and it was pouring down rain. It was an El Nino year, and there's thunderstorms all around. It was just the craziest night I've ever seen on San Diego. And I remember landing, and your adrenaline is so high that you're shaking. I mean, you literally can't stop. And we had spun around out of the landing area, and we parked. We call it the six-pack, so it's right in front of the island. So if you see an aircraft carrier of the island and the number of the ship on it, we're sitting right in front of that, and we're looking at the landing area. So it's like you get front row seats to the concert. and this EA6B comes in, ugly pass. He ends up catching a one wire, which is the first one. You never want to catch the first one, which means you're not really high above the back of the ship when you landed. And it comes in, and the exhaust on an EA6 or an A6 actually points kind of down, and it blows, and it's blowing all the standing water on the aircraft. That's how hard it's raining. And you literally could not see across. I mean, I could see the front of my airplane, his airplane, and then it was just white because of the water being blown off the deck. Wow. And I'm shaking, and I'll never forget. I looked over at Chris and I said, "Oh my God!" I go, "Hey, dude, man, 10,000-foot runway looks really good right now." And I go, and I'm shaking my hands like this, and I said, I'm not faking this, dude. I go, that's literally, I cannot stop shaking. I said, that scared the ever out of me.
Yeah.
But it scares you afterwards. You don't, during it, you don't have time to think about that. You're doing it. You got to do. As we, kind of the quote from Tom Hanks in, what's that, the girls' baseball movie, where he goes, "There's no crying in baseball." Well,
Oh, yeah.
That's our joke. There's no crying in naval aviation. I said, you can fly around and cry all you want at night, but, there's only one pilot in those airplanes, and you got to land it. So you can cry all you want, wipe the tears away, put on your big kid pants, and it's time to man up and land the jet.
Sorry for the romantic question, but going back to the kid that dreamed to fly, what's it like to fly an airplane? It looks incredible.
To me,
as a human, like a descendant of ape, I sit here on land and look up at you guys. It seems incredible that a human being can do that.
People ask, I'll be sitting around with my friends and they're like, "How was it?" I said, it's the greatest job on the planet. I said, it's an office with a view because you're sitting in a glass
Office with the...
You can do, it's like roller coasters. You go, oh, it does all these cool stuff. So we take people flying every once in a while. And it's like, oh, yeah, I like roller coasters. I go, no, take any roller coaster, the coolest roller coaster you've ever been on, and multiply it by 1,000. I said, it's an experience, to put your body under, the jet's rated at 7.5, but it'll pull up to 8.1 before it overstresses. Depends on fuel weight. So, you routinely get up there towards 8 Gs. To be able to do that to your body, it takes a toll. Like, I can't really turn my head real good anymore and stuff like that. But would I trade it? It was a childhood dream. And how many people get to do that? Professional. I want to be an NFL, and you end up to the NFL, which is a very small percentage. But, well, I want to fly jets and to fly. At the time when I was flying, the Super Hornets that we had on our squadron were brand new, like literally right out of the factory. I'd come off our first Super Hornet cruise. We had went to the Boeing factory in St. Louis where they were building my new jets that I was going to get, and I actually signed the inside of one of the wings while they were putting it together. So I'm meeting the people that are putting the jet together that's going to get delivered to me in a couple of months that I'm going to fly. So
the whole of it is incredible.
I'll tell you what, when I left, when I decided to walk away.
Do you miss it?
I told myself I wouldn't. I promised myself that, once you get through your 05 command, your flying really starts to come down. Even if you go and you're an air wing commander, which is, we call them CAG, carrier or commander, you're not flying as much as like the normal pilots, nor should you be. There's young people that are coming up and it's training your relief because that's the next generation. So, like currently, I have friends of mine that we serve together, their kids are flying Super Hornets, right? So, to me, that's really neat because I watched them when they were little, and now, one of them who was good friends, I won't get his last name, but Joey, who lived down the street from us, was a Top Gun instructor, and I'm like, hey, Joey's a Top Gun, and I'm like, that's cool because I went there and I knew him. He would come down to my house, and now to see these kids that are, because typically military breeds military, because the kids grew up in it. The only reason that my son is not doing it is he's colorblind. So it disqualifies you for being a pilot, being a SEAL, because he talked about doing that because he's an incredible swimmer and he likes doing that stuff, and a water polo player. But he's, both of my kids are, well, my daughter is a doctor and my son's in his 3rd year, so.
But there's I suppose, from my perspective, a bittersweet handover of this incredible experience of flying to the younger generation. So you told yourself you're not going to miss it. You miss it?
There are days I do. When I hear jets, like if I'm around a base or a jet flies over, but I have all the memories, so I can look at it and go, it can't go on forever. Tom Brady can't play football, but there's going to come a time where he has to stop.
He seems to have done it for a long time.
But, typically when you look at it, you go, I had the opportunity, and I think as automation moves on, especially with AI, that, when will the last man fighter be built? And that's that big question. We just did F-35. It's over budget. It's 7 years late. There's all kinds of issues when we try and do it. And then you look at some of the new stuff that's coming out that the Air Force is working on with smaller, cheaper, attritable platforms that you can go, oh, we can, because if you don't put a man in the box or a person, because there's a lot of incredibly talented women that do this too, so I'll just say that as person.
Yeah, so we say man and he, we mean both men and women, because offline you've told me about a lot of incredible women that fall. So
I had three female, actually four. One of them didn't fly anymore. She actually lives right around here. She ended up going into aircraft maintenance when she couldn't fly anymore. One of the girls, who everyone knows is incredibly, she's one of the most gifted people I've ever met in my life. She is the vice president of Amazon Air. You can see her on TV. Her name's Sarah. Incredible. And then I had Paige, who ended up taking command. She got out of fighters and went into other platforms, and she was a commanding officer. And then the other one is teaches leadership, and she is, all three of them, actually all four of the women that were direct, I'm hoping not forgetting, I don't think I'm forgetting someone, incredibly talented, and a great addition to the Ready Room. So anyone that gets into women can't do it, that's all total horse crap. And, we can talk about the original integration and stuff, which was not done well by the military nor the Navy.
So women can fly as good as the guys?
Yeah. You can't tell, if you pass another airplane, you can't tell if there's a man or a woman in it. It really comes down to stick and throttle, the ability to extrapolate where the vehicle is going to be, where the airplane would be if you're fighting another one. You have to be able to think fast. Anyone who has those characteristics can do it. And then I think most important besides that, there has to be a desire.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that everyone, if you took, because we used to track, so when I ran, we call it the RAG, it's the Replacement Air Group. It's where, so the Super Hornet Training Squadron, there's two of them. There's one on the East Coast, 106, and there's one on the West Coast, which is VFA 122. 122 is the first one. So I ended up going there, and I ended up being the operations officer and training officer, okay? So we tracked the last 100 students, right? So everyone goes, it's funny to hear students talk, because, he's awesome, if you took the 100, there's 3 at the top of the list that are just naturally gifted aviators. They're well above average. It's like the person in a math class that sits down in complex math, and they just get it. Yeah. At the bottom, there's the 3 at the bottom that are going to struggle, and there's a good chance they won't get out. And if they do get out, they're going to have to work really hard to just maintain kind of average. Sometimes it's just the way your mind works. Not everyone is good at everything. If you took the 94 of them in the middle, they're within one mean deviation of, it's there. They're all, the bell curve doesn't look real good. It's just a big hump, and it comes back down, and everyone's right there within one mean deviation. And then you have the outliers, usually not on the high side because they're going to get through, but the outliers on the low side that don't make it through. So for the most part, the Navy does a really good job, as does the Air Force, of screening. So now what they do, when I went, you just showed up and you started. Now what you do is you actually go fly Piper Warriors, low wing, to see, are you adaptable to this? And there's an evaluation that goes through, and then if you hit a certain mark, then you're good to go, and then they put you into primary. It's kind of like a pre-check, like the pre-SAT, the pre-SAT, to go, hey, how am I going to do on the SAT? It's very similar to that, but it's more of a hand skill, can you adapt? Because although we live in 3 dimensions, like this table is not, this is all has depth, width, all that. It's really, relative to aviation, we are 2-dimensional. Very 2-dimensional.
Can you explain that? So our perception is actually more limited than that of an aviator?
Very much. And here's why.
Yeah. So
we look at, let's look at a tall building. Let's look at One World Trade Center in New York, because everyone knows what it looks like, big, tall building. It's maybe 1,800 feet tall? Even the Burj Al Dubai, which is 20-some hundred feet tall, it's not that big. So a Super Hornet, to do what a split S is, which is, I'm flying, I'm just going to roll the airplane upside down, and then I'm going to do basically a C, the letter C. I'm going to go in the top and out the bottom. So, and it's basically a vertical displacement of the airplane. So I'm going from high to low. It's very tight, and it does it in roughly about 2,500 feet, give or take a little. So you go, that is a really tight vertical turn.
Yeah.
For example, the A6, in order to do that, was about 9,000 feet. And we look at a building that's 2,000 feet high and think that is tall.
Right.
All right, so in aviation sense, when you're starting to do vertical displacement maneuvers, going from 35,000 feet down to 20,000 feet in a matter of seconds, and maneuvering the airplane, because the human brain thinks we really are, we like to be flat.
I see what
We
you mean.
think 2D. So if I'm fighting, how you really get an advantage when you're fighting another airplane is to work in the vertical. Because most people will do like one move in the vertical and then they're just going to stop moving because that's where they're comfortable.
The 3D nature.
You do, because you have to project where you're going to be. So you have to know the performance of the airplane, knowing that, hey, if I do this maneuver, that I am going to go. It's kind of like when I talk about when we were chasing the Tic Tac. So the Tic Tac's coming up, and I'm at about, and I've been doing this for, at the time, 16 years. So I'm looking and I'm going, hey, I'm here, he's there on the other side of the circle. I'm going to do a vertical displacement. I'm going to go like this. I'm going to cut across the circle, and I'm not going to him. I'm going out in front of him. I'm going over here. Because I know that by the time I get through this maneuver, that's where he's going to be, and I'm trying to basically join up on him. But I also had to look at it to go, do I have enough altitude to do this? Because what I did, if we're here and I do this, I'm going to end up over here, and he's going to be above me, and then, I have to get that energy back to get up to him. And when you're doing a max performance, it's a trade. So you have, this is really important when you're fighting airplanes and you're really max performing. So when you go to an air show and you see the air demo, he's literally playing with it. He's got a finite amount of energy, right? He can add some with the motors and stuff, but what you're really doing is it's a trade-off. And you can trade off kinetic energy, speed for altitude, which gives you potential energy. The other piece is I can trade some of that kinetic energy for performance. Because I know if I do a nice easy turn, the airplane will make it and what doesn't bleed energy. But I know if I do a real tight, that 2,500 foot split S, that it's going to cost me energy. So if I enter the split S at 200 knots and I do it right, I'm going to come out at the bottom at probably 200 knots. So although I lost 2,500 feet of potential energy, I converted that to kinetic, and that kinetic is transitioned and bled off the wings in order for me to get that high performance turn. And you have to constantly evaluate where you're at, and it's your overall energy package. So you can have a guy that's behind you that looks like he's going to kill you, but if this jet is at 400 knots and this jet is at 110 knots, this jet's just going to pull away, drive around, and kill him in about 30 seconds. Right? It's overall energy package, and that's that. You got to be constantly evaluating where you're at. And this is that 80% solution. Can I afford to do this or not? Yes, no. And you have literally a split second to make the decision.
The most incredible dance of human decision making. It's just incredible. I know a million people want me to talk about Tic Tac, and I definitely will. But let me ask one last ridiculous subjective question. What's the greatest plane ever made in history? You don't get to
From pure speed, I would say SR-71. I think it's an engineering marvel that was actually developed in the 50s by Kelly Johnson, Smokeworks. For what that was able to do, and then when you get into the history of it, you know how they actually built, the CIA actually made like 6 companies in order to buy the titanium from Russia, to bring it back and build an airplane out of titanium that we would fly over Russia. To me, it's an incredible
engineering marvel.
I think that, like X-15,
By the way, that's sorry to interrupt. The SR-71 still holds the speed record of any plane, as far as I can understand.
Yeah, what's funny when you get into it is remember, fast is relative. When I say that, I mean, so if you're going 3,000 miles an hour, 100 feet above the ground, you're going 3,000 miles an hour through, that's how fast you're going. When you get up to altitude, there's an indicated airspeed and there's your ground speed. So your indicated airspeed is really how fast the air is going past your airplane. Well, the air is so thin up there, you may only be showing like 300 knots. But at 300 knots, you're really doing 2,500 miles an hour over the ground. So, like we would take the airplanes up to 50,000 feet when we had to do the maintenance check flights on them. So when you're doing 200, and some odd knots, it's actually slow for the airplanes. You're getting, it's kind of like, it's not, there's maneuvering speeds. You know that if I hit a certain speed in a Super Hornet, that I have the full capability of the airfoil. If I'm below that speed, I'm going to stall the airfoil before I get to the maximum G. Okay? So when you look at something like that, you go, well, is it really going fast? and when you look at an SR-71 that's flying upwards of 70,000+ feet, the air's so thin, just like the X-15, you can get to a much higher speed, but the relative speed of the air going over you is actually relatively low. So the stresses on the airframe are not like they would be if you were down low. But because you're going fast to get enough air over your pitot-static system to show that you're going 300 knots, you're screaming. I mean, the fastest I ever got was I was with soon-to-be Vice Admiral White, so we had taken a check flight, and I got it up to 1.78. I got a Super Hornet up to Mach 1.78, and we were right by Pebble Beach too. And then,
what's that feel like? Or
when you get that fast, to me it got a little bit weird because you realize in your brain, and I did, that there's no out. If something happens, I can't eject. Yeah. The ejection would kill me.
Isn't that kind of liberating in a way? Or no, maybe
you
not.
always want to push the limit. It's like how fast. I could have got going faster. It was literally still accelerating when I stopped, but it was fuel limited and space limited because I'm off the coast of California, Big Sur, and I'm going, and I can see Pebble Beach out in the distance. The whole Monterey Peninsula.
You're just going.
And you're doing almost 18 miles a minute. I mean, you're screaming.
Yeah.
I mean, and then you have to turn. Well, the airplane didn't have anything on it. It was a slicked-off Super Hornet, so it was basically just the airplane. No pylons, no pods, no nothing. And then we had to get it turned around because we got to go to the exit point for the area, and I'm trying to get it down below to subsonic. And there's a bunch of things that are disabled, like the speed brakes that normally we pop out when you're going that fast. They don't, because the Super Hornet really doesn't have speed brakes. It deforms the flight controls. They don't function, so you're trying to maneuver, and when you're going that fast, you can't turn because a 7G turn at 1.5 Mach is a pretty big turn. So it's crazy.
It's incredible that a human can do this, and a human can engineer the system which allows another human to go.
Bullshit. Can't watch one thing and they're talking about this guy. Isn't it fun? Just have a freaking fun. Oh man. I'm gonna put, who is this? Oh wow. Then I had this part. What the hell is that? Okay. Let's just put it over here for now. Very good, dear. Uh-oh. Okay, what do we have here? How do we get this done? No, that was bad. Well, it's pretty cool, I guess. I mean, if I wanted to do that, a little bit of that blue, red. Yeah, I can probably capture that. Here he goes, I already do. This is a good face. Alright, let's do that one again.